I'm going to sit with this jealousy and allow whatever emotion comes up to come up. I'm not going to judge it, suppress it, bat it down, or shame it. And if I end up fetal position sobbing on the floor, so be it. If I end up screaming and raging alone in my car, so be it. If I end up yelling and calling my mother who's on the other side terrible names that you think are terrible, then so be it. A spiritual person will allow herself to fully feel and fully express in honor of the healing, without judgment and without shame. Now, you may feel judgment and you may feel the shame. Okay, cool. Let it happen, but let it keep moving. Don't let it take over and interrupt this process. I think then a spiritual person might keep a record of what she's discovering. Maybe you're journaling, or maybe you're creating art, or maybe you're processing it with someone, but noting what she's learning. Welcome to the Intrepid Soul podcast, where we explore what it takes to build a human life that's congruent with your soul. I'm Katie Benway, a mystic, teacher, and author, here to walk with you through the wilds of the human experience as we get to know and get closer to the soul. Let's get curious, courageous, and conscious together. Hi there. Welcome back to the Intrepid Soul podcast. Thanks for being with me. And if you're new, welcome. I'm so thrilled that you're here. So today I have another Q&A for you, a great follow-up question to the very first Q&A I did about loved ones on the other side and interacting with loved ones on the other side. This question, I'm so glad to have received this question because it prompts us to talk about the complexity of relationships and the complexity that carries over into death. It is the other side of the coin, the other side of connecting with loved ones on the other side. This is about the other side of that coin that says, yeah, what if it was complicated? So let's get into it. I have a question today from Sarah. She says, "Hi, Katie. In your last Q&A, you talked about people in our lives passing away and connecting with them on the other side. It was mainly positive, like they're over there wanting to help us and love us. And I have to admit, sometimes when I hear people having positive connections, I get sad and a little jealous. My mother died, and it's so complicated. Her life was complicated, and my experience as her daughter was incredibly complicated. When she died, I felt so many things: confusion, relief, guilt, sadness, wishing that it had all been different. I sometimes feel jealous that other people had mothers who loved them so purely. I don't mean jealous in a way where I wish that people didn't have that. I just wish that I did. So my question is, what happens when someone dies and it was complicated? What do I do as a spiritual person? And what do you think someone like my mom is doing on the other side? How do I know if she loves me from the other side if she didn't seem to love me when she was here? Thanks for letting me ask this question. I feel all those confusing, guilty, relieved feelings even just asking." So thank you, Sarah, and thank you for your courage in asking this question. I know and can feel how intense and complicated and fraught this is for you. So let's get into it. First of all, I think, Sarah, you've shown us what is, in my opinion, the very first tenet in addressing something like this. You've shown us how to tell the truth. You've shown us the power of telling the truth. And that's what I would say to anyone who resonates with this question. We have to tell ourselves the truth about what is heartbreaking or difficult, what causes us suffering. And it can be so hard to do this in the context of a relationship because societally, we're really conditioned to shut up about it, to gloss over it, to give someone a pass. We're conditioned to not acknowledge damage that was caused, and we're certainly not taught how to do repair. And if that repair can't happen with someone else, we're certainly not taught expressly how to do repair with ourselves. And so a lot of us who experience fraught relationships in our lifetimes, and then someone in that relationship passes away, that fraughtness continues in the wake of their death. And it can feel really disorienting and confusing. And so the thing that I say to clients first and foremost is tell the truth. Tell the truth to yourself. If you have a trusted person you can tell the truth to, then please enlist that person to be your witness. But at the very least, tell yourself the truth. And so, Sarah, if your mother has crossed and you are feeling both relieved and guilty, if you're feeling wistful, if you're wishing it was different and angry that it wasn't, if you're wrestling with how complicated this grief is and how it doesn't fit kind of a typical sad, I miss them mold, then tell yourself the truth about that. And I know you have, because you wrote this question. And writing this question, you've now told me your truth. And so great job. Remember that we can't change something that we don't tell the truth about. None of us can create a different outcome or create healing or work through something without acknowledging the full truth of it. And in acknowledging and telling the truth, we are accepting the truth. And that is really key, isn't it? I think for any of us who've done healing around relationships, there's always some measure of acceptance, accepting this person for what they cannot do, for the boundary that they set, for what or who they cannot be for you. And in accepting, we then can learn what our response is. If you have had a difficult relationship that you've set boundaries in, and that can go all the way up to estrangement, you know what I'm talking about. Because the only way you come to a place where you're able to set a boundary is if you acknowledge the truth of the situation, the harm that's being caused, the way that you're shrinking or shifting or silencing yourself in this other person's presence, or accepting that participating in the family gathering is deeply unhealthy for you. When you set boundaries, it means that you've accepted a truth about the way a person behaves. And this doesn't mean that we aren't hopeful that they'll change or available if something shifts and there's an opportunity to talk and repair and take responsibility and grow the relationship. Yes, of course. But accepting what is and the way someone is frees you up to respond to your own needs. It frees you up to set the boundaries that you need to set and begin a healing process. And so all of that is true for the other side. Just because someone dies does not indemnify them from what they have done here in a relationship. It doesn't indemnify them from harm they've caused. It doesn't mean that you should only speak highly of them and shut up about the hard parts. One of like the rules that I hate the most is don't speak ill of the dead. We have to tell the truth about what our experience was. And yeah, that may not mean that you go shout it from the rooftops. Maybe you privately tell that truth in therapy or with a coach or with a best friend or hopefully to yourself. But if you're following a rule that says don't speak ill of the dead, we don't say a bad word about someone who's passed away, you're stuck. You just get stuck. And so it's okay, just as in life, you may have set boundaries with your mother. You may have, with deep grief and sadness, accepted who she could not be and went forward in life and did healing and sought out loving relationships that could give you what you needed. Whatever you did in response to her, Sarah, in your waking life, you get to do as she moves to the other side. And it's why I'm so glad you asked this question, because in the previous Q&A episode, I think that I used a lot of language like loved ones on the other side. And I do that on purpose because for most people, if someone they love and had a loving relationship with crosses over, they're really open to them being a guide, wanting them to be a guide. But if someone crosses over that you had a relationship with and you wouldn't count them as a loved one, or you would count them as a complicated one, or an abusive one, or a difficult one, or at best, one that brought you to therapy, then there is no pressure to connect with that. person on the other side. Just as in life, you are in charge of your space and your boundaries and who you share yourself with and what family gatherings you go to and which relationships you invest in, you are also responsible for and the leader of your own psychic space. You are in charge of your psychic space. You get to decide who and what comes into that psychic space. And when a complicated person passes away, they don't get to suddenly become your guide. There's no pressure for you to make that a thing or to allow it. And knowing that you are in charge of your psychic space, you are in charge of your energetic space, gives you all of the power that you need. Your power comes from within. And that's true for all of us. Each of us gets to decide, to discern, to determine what feels right, what feels safe, what feels like the right, correct next step. Death doesn't wave a magic wand and indemnify someone or make someone suitable to be your guide. It just doesn't. And so for you, Sarah, I'm certain that as you think about your mother on the other side, you might struggle with, maybe you've felt her, or maybe you've gotten signs or messages. And are you supposed to take those signs or messages or feelings and turn them into a be all end all, or something that should fill you with inspiration and relief? No, you shouldn't. If it does fill you with inspiration and relief, then fabulous. But it probably doesn't. It probably fills you with some trepidation. Maybe you have some resentment, like, so nice to hear from you from the other side. I never heard from you when you were here. Or maybe you feel a loved one kind of knocking at the door and you're saying, I'm not ready for this. I don't want to connect just yet. And I don't know when I'll connect. And that is okay. We're so pressured in our society to give our power away by following rules and by assuming that we are wrong or bad or less than because we set boundaries, or we need time, or we need some space. And the complexities that are inherent in the death of someone with whom you had a complicated relationship, that carries over. And you're still wrestling with those complexities. And so as you tell yourself the truth about this, that truth, because you know truth by the way it feels, right? Every single one of us knows how truth feels. Truth may make us nervous or anxious, or we may have an emotional reaction to it, but you still know it's true. And so when you tell yourself what's accurate about your experience with this person, it creates a baseline in your body, a baseline for truth. I doubted whether my mother loved me. She said she did, but it was complicated. And what I know is I didn't feel loved. And I feel some relief in her passing. And I feel sadness because of what could never be. That is your truth, Sarah. That is the truth. And when you say that to yourself, even as I say it on your behalf, you're going to feel it in your body. I feel it when I say it. I feel it in my stomach, sort of like a resting point, a gravitational center. And now you can weigh whatever you're going through or whatever you're deciding to do against that truth. Does it feel right to connect with your mom on the other side? Does it feel right to wave a wand and forget history? Probably not. Does it feel right, potentially, to process and think about her, to grieve? Maybe. Maybe it'll feel right to think about her trauma and her lineage and what she came from. And maybe it might feel right to wish her healing on the other side. Maybe you might wish her love that she had never known. And maybe you might wish for her to leave you alone. And that's okay. Every spiritual lesson comes packed in paradox. you're holding two competing truths at the same time. So you can wish your mother love and healing while also at the same time asking her for boundary, while at the same time setting the boundary and not allowing her into your psychic space until you're ready. You can wish someone well and also choose to not have them around you. That's true in life and that's true in death. And then as you journey and carry on, maybe that shifts a bit. Maybe there comes a time that you say, I need to forgive and release my mom. I don't want to call her in, but I'd like to release her. Complexity teaches us so much as a human being. Complexity brings us closer to the soul, to the spirit. As humans, we want to create a world where it's just black and white, where it's right or wrong, where we can predict outcomes, because complexity makes us really nervous. And I think some of that is like evolution and biological, and some of that is conditioned discomfort with complexity. I think as a society, we struggle with holding complexity, holding not knowing, being unsure, and holding something that isn't an easy to hold truth. Complexity will show us what we need to learn about ourselves. And I'm sure, Sarah, that you would agree that in this relationship with your mother, through the pain and the grief that I have no doubt you experienced well before she died, because you were grieving not having a mother before she died. You were grieving, your inner child was grieving what she didn't get well before your mother passed. And I'm certain that the grief you experienced throughout your life was informative, because as you told yourself the truth about that grief and accepted what your mother wasn't and what you couldn't get, it invariably would have brought you to a place where you would have considered, how can I get what I need? What relationships do I choose that love me and nourish me and feed me? How do I accept myself when I feel that my mother hasn't accepted me? When I worry deep down that I'm unlovable or unworthy, how do I know that I am? And these are profound questions that would take any of us probably a lifetime to work through. And I'm certain, because you've asked this question, Sarah, that you've worked through some of these things and are continuing to. What I notice when I work with people who've experienced the death of someone and that relationship was unresolved, it wasn't clear. There wasn't clear communication or clarity about how they felt. I think in your case, when we think about a mother, we're wired to turn to our mother for deep and basic needs. And when those needs aren't met, there's a lack of resolution. And so that, I think, really gets kicked up for people when someone dies. I've worked with so many people who experienced the loss of a parent who couldn't give them what they needed, who might have been abusive, who might have been a real force for destruction. And when that parent dies and there isn't realization or responsibility taking, or it just never gets resolved, the grief is heavy and complex. Because what I notice in people who go through this is they're grieving what their parent never was. And they're grieving the fact that the opportunity for the parent to change and become who they need them to be is over. You know this, Sarah, right? Because in your mother's death, the opportunity for your mother to be who you desperately hoped she would be is over. It's over on a human level. It's complete. This life with her is complete on a human level. She's not going to be what you hoped she could be. And so acknowledging that and moving through that complex grief, that is real. That is real, real stuff. And I see this with people where someone passes and the grieving they're doing, the sobbing they're doing is less about being sad that the person is gone and more about being sad about what will never be. And this is where telling the truth is so important. And I know that this truth is not welcome in a lot of places. It's just not. It's people are really uncomfortable with this kind of complexity, right? And so I think that you'd hear a lot of people say, "Oh, don't talk poorly about your mom. She did the best she could." But that's not helpful. And you finding a place where you can speak freely about this is helpful. Because the grieving that's happening for you, for your inner child who never got the mother that she desperately needed, that grief is real. And as you feel that grief and acknowledge that truth and feel the deep emotional well that is there, you power something really sacred in yourself. You power transformation. Remember that everything that we experience in life as humans is meant to expand us. It's meant to help us clarify who we are, what we choose, and where we go. And as you move through this kind of grief and tell yourself a heartbreaking truth, you're leaning into the transformative nature of death, life, grief, truth, disconnection from truth, return to truth. In not having the mother that you needed, Sarah, you have an opportunity to name what you do need. You have an opportunity to find the parts of you that are deeply lovable. And then you have an opportunity to parent those parts of you, to love those parts of you, to be what you always needed. While, yes, you're grieving. And this is why it's so heavy, because doing the work and doing the healing work while feeling what's so difficult about it's hard. It's exhausting. But you can really trust this process. You can really trust that when you tell yourself the truth about the most grievous, difficult thing, you are activating a sacred, transformative power within you. And guidance will flow. Good guidance will flow from the other side. Guidance will flow from your soul, from your center, from your body, from your being. You will move through a transformation where you come to understand more deeply the flawed person your mother was and what that shows you about yourself and how that prompts you to become a more grounded, healed, authentic, loving version of you. We learn lessons often in the inverse, in the without, in the negative, in the not having. It's in the not having that we often learn what we need. It's in the absence of what is right and true and correct that we learn what is right and true and correct. And so as you're going through this process, Sarah, I invite you to be the psychic leader that you need. Because as I said earlier about boundaries, you can bring those boundaries into your psychic and energetic space. You don't have to consider that your mother is on the other side, and now the next order of business is allowing her in or allowing her to be your guide. That may never be true for you. Everyone who has passed does not make a good guide, just as everyone who is living is not qualified to be your therapist or your coach or your spiritual director or a guide. And so tell yourself that truth too, that someone may cross over and be on the other side, and that doesn't suddenly make them wise and ideal. It doesn't make them inspiring or the voice that you're meant to trust. Tell yourself the truth about that and put them in their appropriate place. For people who've experienced really abusive, difficult situations, maybe that person on the other side is as far away as possible. And with them off the planet, you feel safe. And there's never going to be a way. And there's never going to be, and it's never going to be an option to connect with that person. Damn right. Absolutely. You get to set that boundary. You get to be the leader of your psychic and energetic space. That's right. Or maybe over time, as you're healing and growing, you might feel your mother and you might say, listen, my mother is not going to be one of my guides. This is not a voice that is going to come through and power my life, but maybe I might feel her or receive a sign, and it prompts me to release or let out a breath or set something down. That's beautiful. That's sacred. That's powerful. It's not always about someone on the other side giving you messages and leading you and guiding you. Sometimes it's about the right and true and gentle ending, the setting down. But you get to receive this as you are ready. And you may be in a place in the wake of your mother's death where you just need to be in the relief of it and nourishing yourself through the complicated grief of it. And you need some space from the other side. You don't need everyone knocking on your door. That is fine. You be your own leader. And then maybe when you're feeling a little bit more sourced, resourced, nourished, you might find yourself naturally considering, how do I honor the difficulty in my mother's life and release her? Maybe the inner child in you that always wanted your mother to be a certain thing, maybe she finally rests and accepts what isn't and is able to release, to set down the campaign to have her mother love her. These relationships with the other side, and this is true whether they're, highs or lows or good or bad or however you would characterize them, relationships with the other side do evolve. And so what might be true today might change and grow and be different in 6 months or 12 months or 3 years. And so there's no rush. There's no mandate to make someone who has crossed over one of your guides or one of your spirit leaders. In fact, I think there's an invitation to be discerning and to take responsibility for your psychic and energetic space and be the protector that you always needed, to love yourself the way you always needed to be loved. I want to also make a note, Sarah, you talk about feeling a bit jealous, and that's okay. Feeling jealous when you see someone who is able to kind of be free in their grief, really celebrate someone who's died or talk lovingly, really know that they were loved, that what comes up in you is some jealousy. And I think that's really normal. I also want to tell you that that's when you're ready, that is an opportunity for reflection. That's a space to go into. There's grief there. And I would suggest for you that underneath some of that jealousy might be an inner child part of you, might be a little girl who needs to sob about the mother she didn't have. And that's okay. That's not immature. That's not bad. But that constriction you feel, the discomfort you feel in your own jealousy is an invitation for you to feel something really deep and true for you. And this is why bypassing it, this is why glossing over the truth and not speaking the truth is so detrimental, because it doesn't let us feel the deep feelings. Emotions are information. Emotions want to tell us about ourselves, and they want to escort us through life's processes of death and rebirth, of realization and recalibration and realignment. And so when you tell yourself the truth about the reality with your mother and you accept what was, and then that brings you into the grief and the deep emotion and the sharp pangs that are held in your body, you begin to learn about what's really under there. And thinking about a little girl who just wants her mom to love her, who's jealous about other girls whose mothers do love them. You have compassion for that kid, don't you? I do. If you skipped over it, you wouldn't feel the feeling, and then you wouldn't have compassion for her. Having compassion for that inner child and letting her cry and feel and voice to you what she's long wanted to say, that's healing. That's how you move through this transition. Skipping over it, essentially shutting her up because you follow some rule about not speaking ill of the dead. Well, now it's all just still inside your body. And now all that complexity is internalized and it's in your heart and your soul and your blood and your bones, and it's causing you pain. It's still there to be healed. I've often felt that the most complex relationships are the greatest teachers. They teach us about what cannot stand, what is unjust and unfair. They bring us to our knees where we learn about who we really are. They make us reckon with falsehood and non-truth, poor treatment. They make us face where in us we're disconnected from ourselves. And it takes time to get there. It's a faithful one step after another process. You can't snap your fingers and have this all be done. But if you're telling yourself the truth, especially about what's complicated, you're bringing then yourself to a place of acceptance and likely to a place of grief and deep emotion. This is where most of us sob. When we tell the truth and we accept what is, that's where most of us sob, because there's a surrender in there, isn't there? I can't do anything about this and I can't change it. The thing I want the most is not available to me. I cannot change someone else. I can't make someone else treat me a certain way. We feel the devastation, the disappointment, the sadness. We feel the fragility of that space. And in feeling it, I promise you, you will find strength. It will feel like it upends you. But I promise you, as you feel the emotion, it will begin to show you and teach you what is true about you, what is incorrect about what you've been told about yourself or the way you've been treated, and how you might begin to love and honor yourself in a way that you've always needed. Feeling these deep feelings will always lead you to a place of empowerment where you reclaim power that you'd long given away and begin to learn how you can be the source of all that you need. And I'm not talking about not relying on others or not being in relationship, but you can be the source of love and steadiness and truth that you've long been seeking outside of you. You know, you ask me in this question, Sarah, what do I do as a spiritual person? And I wonder if something behind that message is, shouldn't I as a spiritual person forgive and let it go and set it down? Shouldn't I as a spiritual person be the bigger person? I'm supposing that that's what you mean. I suspect that's what you mean. And so yes, ultimately, is setting it down and forgiving one of the most powerful things you could ever do? Absolutely. And that's probably another conversation for another time. But setting it down and forgiving before you have felt what you need to feel and go through the complexity that you need to go through shortchanges you. And so what would a spiritual person do? So I'm not the expert. You're the expert about you. But here's what I would suggest. I think a spiritual person is someone who courageously gets to know themselves. I think a spiritual person is someone who looks at the spots in their life that are causing pain and constriction, confusion and suffering, and says, I've got to go see about this. I've got to look at this. In your case, Sarah, I think being spiritual would be you looking at the moments where you feel so jealous and devastated when someone talks with ease about loving someone who has passed, and going into that space and saying, I'm not going to condemn my jealousy. I'm not going to judge myself for jealousy. I'm not going to make myself bad. I'm actually going to go sit with it. And whether that's pen in hand in front of paper, whether that's in front of an easel, whether that's hiking through nature or being eyes closed in meditation or stillness, sit with that jealousy. I think that's what a spiritual person could do. I'm going to sit with this jealousy because I'm going to learn what I need to know about myself. I'm going to sit here because it's complicated and paradoxical. And I know that spiritual lessons come in the form of paradox. I'm going to sit with this jealousy and allow whatever emotion comes up to come up. I'm not going to judge it, suppress it, bat it down, or shame it. And if I end up fetal position sobbing on the floor, so be it. If I end up screaming and raging alone in my car, so be it. If I end up yelling and calling my mother who's on the other side terrible names that you think are terrible, then so be it. A spiritual person will allow herself to fully feel and fully express in honor of the healing, without judgment and without shame. Now, you may feel judgment and you may feel the shame. Okay, cool. Let it happen, but let it keep moving. Don't let it take over and interrupt this process. I think then a spiritual person might keep a record of what she's discovering. Maybe you're journaling, or maybe you're creating art, or maybe you're processing it with someone, but noting what she's learning. What's below that jealousy? Is there anger and rage? Is there devastating sadness? Maybe in that jealousy, you get an image of you as a young girl, a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 12-year-old. A spiritual person would sit with her, would listen to her, would let her express. A spiritual person would know that death does not simplify life. It simply invites you to consider new things, new perspectives. Death allows you to be situated differently. It gives you a chance to process with some more space. And yes, a spiritual person might consider that with her mother on the other side, there is more opportunity for healing, because her mother is no longer contained and constrained within and by her human body, contained and constrained by whatever her emotional capacity was, by her trauma, by what she couldn't heal. That by being on the other side, there inevitably is more opportunity for healing for both of you. There's room to move and shift. There's room for greater realization. There's room for assistance from friendly and loving guides. And a spiritual person would know that there is no rush. There is no rush to get connected with her mother on the other side. There is no rush to get to an outcome. A spiritual person would know that this could take a long time. And she would also be looking for change, openings. She'd be curious. She'd go in and sit next to her inner child and feel the feelings, and then also expect the unexpected and be ready to respond to the unexpected. A spiritual person is someone who values self-awareness and who, one step at a time, builds the emotional and spiritual stamina to sit with what is complex and unclear, complicated, grievous, and hard, because she knows that these are the greatest transformations, because she knows that these are the greatest transformation points of her life. These are the points that will bring her to deep discovery. She will clarify who she is, and then what she chooses and what she stands for and what she gives to those around her. Sarah, thank you for this question. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for the way this question opened up a vulnerable space for a lot of us who know exactly what you're talking about. Thank you for being with me today. I so appreciate the questions that you're sending in. Please keep them coming. I love truly nothing more than answering your questions. It makes me feel connected to you. And it is such a wonderful feeling to be in the learning and the evolution of life. I think that this is the meaning. This is the purpose. This is why we're here. So thank you. In honor of this conversation, meet me over at the Intrepid Soul Collective. That's over on Patreon, and it's my community. It's where we can do this work together in a place where there's patience and tenderness and kindness and no judgment. And so I've created a little bit of an activity for us to do over there around truth and around grief. And if you're interested, if you want to go deeper, if this conversation brought up a lot for you, go ahead and meet me over at the Intrepid Soul Collective. Thank you for joining me here on the Intrepid Soul podcast. If you'd like to continue the conversation and the work of your soul, join me over on Patreon at the Intrepid Soul Collective. There you'll find tons of resources and support connected to the conversations we have here to help you make your soul work practical and embodied. There are live sessions with me, bonus Q&As where you can go deeper with me and my guests, companion guided meditations and ceremonies, and so much more. Because we can't just talk about it, we've got to become it. Check out the show notes for details and links, and hit follow on this podcast. It'll keep new episodes at the top of your feed, and it helps me build the Intrepid Soul community. Until next time, take good care of yourself and your soul.